A rainy night in Washington, D.C., with the glow of streetlights reflecting off the wet asphalt. Cars rush by, while on the corner of a narrow street, a black pickup truck suddenly cuts off a silver SUV. Engines roar, horns blare. Inside the truck, behind the wheel, sits William Grayson, a tall, rugged-faced white man and a veteran DEA agent, trying to stay composed. In the SUV, a stern-looking black man, Anthony Harris, an FBI agent, visibly frustrated. Neither knows the other's identity, but a confrontation is inevitable. William steps out of his truck, his heavy boots splashing against the soaked pavement, eyes locked on the SUV. "What do you think you're doing?" he shouts, his voice cutting through the sound of the rain. Anthony, taking a deep breath, opens his door and steps out, his imposing frame and burning eyes radiating anger. "I should ask you that, man." Crossing without looking? They stand face to face, both accustomed to solving problems with authority and decisiveness, but this clash is more than a simple traffic dispute. There's something deeper at play, a silent struggle for respect, for space. Beneath the surface, each carries stories of pain, personal and professional battles that have shaped their lives and hardened their beliefs. William, hardened by years on the job and the trauma of losing colleagues in operations, sees Anthony as a threat, an outsider who doesn't understand the nuances of his mission. Anthony, in turn, views William as the embodiment of a system that has challenged him at every step, even when he followed every rule. "Listen here," William steps closer, his gaze unyielding. "Some of us have real work to do." Anthony lets out a bitter laugh. "Oh, I get it. So, my job is just a hobby to you?" His words slice through the air like sharp blades, and for a moment, both men feel the weight of their own arrogance. Around them, the city continues its rhythm, indifferent to their conflict. But for these two men, this encounter is a breaking point. Both are proud of their work, yet they share a simmering exhaustion, a sense of fighting against a system larger and more unjust than themselves. And, perhaps unknowingly, they see in each other a reflection of what they've always fought against. The tension builds, and a small crowd begins to gather, drawn by the confrontation. Amid the simmering anger, something unexpected happens. A boy in a hoodie and simple clothes, seemingly homeless, steps closer and watches with sharp eyes. The boy looks at William and Anthony and suddenly blurts out, "You two act like bullies, but you're just cowards." The silence that follows is jarring. Anthony and William, caught off guard, freeze and exchange glances. The boy's provocation reverberates between the two agents like a slap in the face. William, who prides himself on maintaining control, feels his cheeks flush with shame. He narrows his eyes at the boy, trying to decipher the deeper meaning behind his words. Anthony, crossing his arms, exhales heavily, trying to regain his composure, but the boy's remark lingers in his mind. Sensing their hesitation, the boy presses further. "You think you're better than everyone else, but what are you doing here? Fighting in the rain like a couple of idiots." His voice is steady, fearless, carrying a precocious wisdom. He looks no older than 15, but his words cut through the two middle-aged men before him like knives. "How many times have you actually helped someone? How often have you saved someone from pain instead of just fighting over status?" William and Anthony exchange a bewildered look. They had never imagined their careers and actions could be questioned by a stranger, let alone a boy who appeared so young. Something about his tone unsettled them, stirring memories of moments in their own lives they'd rather forget. Moments where, despite being seen as heroes, they had failed those they loved or left behind promises unfulfilled. "Listen, kid," William begins, struggling to maintain composure, "it's not as simple as it looks. There are things you don't understand." But before he can finish, the boy raises a hand, cutting him off. "You all say the same thing. But you know what I think? You're just looking for excuses to avoid the things that really matter." Anthony shakes his head, trying to push away the uncomfortable feeling that the boy might be right. How many times had he put work above everything else? How many relationships had he sacrificed? How much of his humanity had he surrendered, in the name of a purpose that now felt hollow? Every word the boy said brought back memories of his younger brother, Derek, lost to street violence. Derek had always asked for help, but Anthony had never made the time to listen. "What's your name?" Anthony asks, almost without realizing it. The boy lifts his chin, proud. "Liam." There's something about his stance, a certain dignity, a presence that, despite his youth, carries a truth the older men can't ignore. For a fleeting moment, William feels like he's looking at a younger version of himself, before life's frustrations and scars had taken their toll. The rain continues to fall, but the silence between the three is so thick it nearly drowns out the sound of the droplets hitting the pavement. William feels a weight in his chest, as if an old wound he'd long ignored is finally being exposed. Anthony feels a pang of regret, a sudden need to fix something he can't fully understand. Liam takes a step back, his gaze unwavering as he looks at both men. "You think you're in control, but you're not. If you knew what really mattered, you wouldn't be here." With those words, he slowly walks away, disappearing into the shadows of the street. William and Anthony remain silent, standing motionless in the rain. A deep discomfort lingers between them, as though the universe had, for some inexplicable reason, offered them a chance to see their lives from a new perspective. As Liam vanishes into the darkness, William and Anthony stay frozen, lost in thought. The rain begins to let up, leaving behind a dense silence where moments ago a clash threatened to explode. William lowers his head, trying to process what just happened, but Liam's words echo in his mind like a heavy burden. "Cowards." That word, spoken by a boy, felt like a verdict, as if the world had laid bare a weakness he'd never admit. Anthony, too, is lost in his thoughts, staring at the wet sidewalk as fragments of memory flood his mind. He thinks of Derek and how he had left him behind in pursuit of a dream that drained his personal life. How many times had he heard his brother beg for just a moment of his attention? And how many times had he ignored it, always prioritizing work? Now, he feels small, almost defeated, haunted by the consequences of his choices. "Look. I think we went too far," William murmurs, breaking the silence. His voice is rough, quieter than usual, and Anthony looks up, surprised at the vulnerability etched into William's face. "This isn't what we signed up for, is it?" The question lingers, and both men know the answer. No, it wasn't. It wasn't about becoming hardened, dehumanized men, fighting in the street over a petty clash of egos. Anthony sighs, crossing his arms as he looks at William. The truth is, maybe the kid was right. We're running. But from what? The words spill out before he realizes how much they affect him. I've always been good at finding excuses, but now I wonder what I've let slip away while I was doing my duty. William feels a pang of empathy, an unexpected connection to the man who, moments ago, was just a potential enemy. He can't recall the last time he had a conversation this honest. For a moment, he lets his guard down and shares a piece of his own pain. "I've lost friends, you know. I've watched good people get destroyed, and I guess somewhere along the way, I stopped believing it was worth it." Anthony nods, understanding. He knows that feeling all too well, that fine line between conviction and despair that haunts agents like them. "You stopped believing you were a good man, didn't you?" The question lands like a blow, and William stays silent, surprised at the accuracy of what Anthony just said. Yes, he had stopped believing that. Around them, the city begins to quiet, the flow of people reduced to a few silhouettes. The sound of raindrops on the pavement feels like a heavy sigh, marking the end of an internal battle for both men. William leans against the side of his truck, exhausted, and looks up at the dark sky. "Do you think there's still time to change? To find what we lost along the way?" Anthony doesn't answer right away. Instead, he steps closer and extends a hand, a simple gesture, but one that carries a promise of understanding. "Maybe this is the first real chance we've got." William looks at the outstretched hand, hesitates for a moment, and finally takes it. It's a silent gesture, but one full of meaning. They're not just colleagues, they're brothers in battle, both scarred by the same dilemmas and struggles. As they shake hands, both realize that something within them has shifted. Side by side, the two men walk down the empty sidewalk. A quiet camaraderie surrounds them, but for William, it's unsettling. Every step he takes alongside Anthony makes Liam's words echo louder inside him. He feels the conversation needs to go deeper, that, for the first time, he may need to expose his failures without the armor of being an agent. Anthony, William begins, his voice hesitant. I've never told anyone this. Not even my family. He pauses for a moment, memories surfacing like shadows in his mind. 3 years ago, on a mission in Mexico, I lost a partner, my best friend. He averts his gaze, staring at the city lights. He was like a brother, you know? And I was there, but I couldn't save him. Since then, it's like a part of me died with him. Anthony listens in silence, his face serious but attentive. He feels the weight of that confession and understands the invisible scars carried by those who've lost someone in the line of duty. That wasn't your fault, William, he says, his voice softer than usual. This job is full of risks, and we all know that. But I get what you're feeling. William exhales shakily, as though part of the weight he's carried is finally lifting. He realizes that, even though Anthony had been a stranger just minutes ago, he now feels a level of trust in him he hasn't felt in years. And you? William asks, sensing a connection forming. What have you been running from all this time? Anthony hesitates, his expression tense. But after a moment, he decides to open a door he had long kept locked. My brother, Derek, he begins, his voice heavy with emotion. He died a few years ago. He was younger, and I always said I was too busy to see him. He asked for my help, William. He begged to get off the streets, to find a better life. But I always thought he could wait. Anthony closes his eyes, haunted by memories of his brother. He got mixed up with the wrong gang, and he was found dead in an alley. I lost the chance to help him. I lost the chance to be a good brother. William places a hand on Anthony's shoulder, a simple gesture that conveys all the solidarity he can muster. We're not so different, are we? He murmurs, seeing himself in the man beside him. Both of them were running from the same thing, regret, pain, and the sense of powerlessness in the face of what they'd lost. Anthony shakes his head. And maybe that's why we were here, fighting in the rain like two fools. Because deep down, this anger we feel isn't directed at others, it's aimed at ourselves. William nods, feeling the truth in those words. For years, he had blamed himself for what happened, turning his pain into anger and using it as a shield. And here, in this honest and unexpected conversation, he finally realizes it might be time to let go of that weight. The two men keep walking, and a new silence falls between them, a lighter one. It's the silence of two people who, after so long, have found mutual understanding. As they walk, the rain subsides, and the clouds begin to break apart, revealing a starry night sky. Both feel a strange lightness, as if the storm they just weathered, not just the rain but the confrontation and the truths revealed, had washed away something deeper within them. Their steps, once heavy, now seemed to carry them with purpose, as though something was calling them toward a long-awaited redemption. William breaks the silence, pointing to a small cafe by the street. How about some coffee? I don't think this night's over yet. Anthony nods, smiling for the first time. It's not every day you meet someone who understands what it's like to carry this kind of weight. As they step into the cafe, the warmth envelopes them, pushing away the lingering chill in their bodies. They settle at a table in the back, where the lighting is soft, and the atmosphere feels comforting. William glances around at the other customers, ordinary people, carefree, laughing, and chatting. He wonders how many of them also carry invisible burdens, secrets, and regrets that no one else knows. Anthony takes a sip of his coffee, his eyes fixed on the steam rising from the cup. You know, William, sometimes I think we got into this line of work because we thought we could make a difference. But deep down, maybe we were just trying to save ourselves. He leans forward, his fingers interlocked. Maybe saving the world was just an excuse. A way to fill the emptiness that guilt left behind. William feels the weight of those words, as if Anthony had articulated something he himself had never dared to admit. He leans back in his chair, gripping his coffee cup tightly. I always thought that if I kept fighting, somehow, I could make up for what happened in Mexico. But now, looking at you, I realize it was never going to bring my partner back, and maybe it was never going to bring me peace. Anthony lets out a long breath. My brother always said the world was full of injustice, and only those brave enough to fight for it could change it. But the truth is, the first battle we have to win is the one inside ourselves. I never understood that until now. The two men sit in silence, absorbing the weight of those reflections. As cliched as it might sound, there is something profound and true in every word spoken. They realized the redemption they had been seeking wasn't in dangerous missions or saving the world but in a deep understanding of themselves and the scars they carry. Slowly, an idea begins to form in William's mind. Anthony, what if we could do something more with our lives? He hesitates but presses on. What if, instead of trying to resolve conflicts around the world, we started helping real people, the ones who need it and are never heard? Anthony looks at him with a mix of surprise and understanding. Are you suggesting we walk away from our agencies? The idea feels absurd, yet incredibly liberating. Maybe it's time to leave the past behind, William. William nods slowly, feeling he's standing on the edge of a life-changing decision. That simple, unassuming cafe becomes a place of new possibilities, where two men, once adversaries, now envision a different future. Hearing his own words echo in the quiet cafe, William feels the full weight of his proposal. Walking away from their careers isn't a simple decision, it's a choice that challenges everything he and Anthony have built, and, in a way, everything they are. The loyalty to their work, the respect they've earned, the sense of mission, leaving it all behind would feel like discarding a part of themselves. Anthony stays silent for a long time, his eyes fixed on the nearly empty coffee cup. He mentally revisits the battles he's fought, the sleepless nights, the promises made and never kept. Leaving the FBI would feel like giving up who I am, he says at last, his tone revealing the internal struggle consuming him. But, maybe I was never really me. William studies Anthony's face and sees a reflection of his own doubts. Both men had become who they were because of their profession, but something inside them had always questioned that path. Maybe that's the point, William replies firmly. Maybe the identity we've built is a mask we put on to hide from what we don't want to face. Anthony offers a faint, bitter smile. Maybe. But without that mask, who are we really? He wonders if leaving the FBI would also mean leaving behind the purpose of his life. Yet something in William's words reveals a new perspective, a freedom he had never allowed himself to consider. The truth is, we've spent so much time chasing criminals, fighting invisible enemies, that we've forgotten the basics, life itself. And maybe it's time to do something that truly changes it. William takes a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision they're both on the verge of making. They know that abandoning their careers won't erase the past or the pain of their losses, but there's a sense they're at a crossroads, one they might never have recognized if not for the fateful meeting that night. Anthony, let's be honest. How many lives have we really changed? How many people have we truly helped, beyond the ones who showed up in our reports? The question hangs in the air, and they both know the answer is painful. Yes, they fulfilled their duty, arrested criminals, but the real transformation in the lives they touched always seemed distant, almost superficial. Anthony lifts his gaze, meeting William's with a newfound determination. You're right. If we're going to do this, we need to commit. Not just to the idea of helping but to the people we want to impact. We need to let go of pride, of rivalries, and genuinely commit to this change. William nods, feeling the warmth of a conviction he hasn't felt in years. Then let's do it. Let's find a way to put our experience and skills to work for something greater, free from the chains that held us back before. They shake hands again, but this time, not as agents on opposing sides. Now, they are two men sharing a new purpose, one that doesn't involve titles or status but a true mission of transformation. The days that follow are intense. William and Anthony begin taking the first steps to leave the agencies that had defined their lives. However, as they deal with the bureaucracy and implications of their decision, they realize that walking away won't be easy. Documents to sign, explanations to provide, and unavoidable meetings with their superiors, each step feels like a reminder of everything they're giving up. William, in particular, feels the weight of this decision when he is called in for one final conversation with his supervisor. A stern and pragmatic man, the supervisor had always trusted William, but now his expression carries disappointment and even contempt. "So that's it? You're turning your back on everything we've built? You're throwing away a solid career for what exactly?" The sharpness of his words cuts through the room, but William remains resolute. "I'm walking away because, for the first time, I understand what truly matters," William replies, his voice calm, surprising even himself. "I've spent my whole life trying to protect people, but, in the end, I haven't changed much. And now, that's what I need to do, something that creates real impact, something that changes lives for good." Though spoken with conviction, his words don't sway his supervisor, who simply nods in disapproval and leaves William with the sense that he's abandoning not just a job but a part of the legacy he helped build. Yet, William knows this decision was already made in his heart. He looks out the office window one last time, silently saying goodbye to a life he once believed was his sole purpose. Meanwhile, Anthony faces a different challenge. The agency he worked for demands a detailed explanation for his resignation. The questioning is direct and almost invasive. What's the real motivation behind this decision? He finds himself forced to confront his reasons, to put into words the pain of losing his brother and the lingering feeling of powerlessness that has haunted him. In a dark, cold room, Anthony sits across from a group of superiors, their gazes piercing as though he were a traitor. "I spent years believing it was my duty to fight crime. But I failed to fight for the person who needed me the most. Since then, I've realized, maybe I was in the wrong place all along. I don't want to fight shadows anymore. I want to do something that my brother would have been proud to see." A tense silence fills the room, and one of the superiors nods with a mix of understanding and resignation. "You were always a good agent, Anthony. It's a shame you couldn't find your peace here." Anthony silently acknowledges the remark, feeling that he's not just leaving a career but also shedding a heavy burden of expectations that had weighed on him for years. After leaving their respective agencies, William and Anthony meet at a park they agreed on as a rendezvous point. Both feel the chill of finality but also the warmth of newfound freedom. "So, this is it," Anthony says, looking at William with a tired smile. "We're officially free." William smiles back. "Free to find a new purpose," he replies as they walk through the park, each step feeling lighter than the last. The days that follow are ones of rebuilding. William and Anthony meet daily in a small rented room, an improvised space they turn into their headquarters. It's humble, lacking the grandeur of the agencies they came from, but it represents something invaluable to both, the beginning of a new mission, one where the decisions are theirs and the impact, profound. The first issue they discuss is how to use their skills to serve the most vulnerable communities. "We need to understand the reality of these people before we act," William suggests. "We've spent so much time fighting what's wrong, but we never stop to truly listen to the needs of those who need us the most." Anthony agrees and proposes starting with a nearby neighborhood known for its high crime rates. They decide to immerse themselves, speaking with residents, community leaders, and local organizations. There, among stories of resilience and hardship, they realize the true value of the work they are beginning. One day, they meet Raquel, a middle-aged woman who lost her son to drug trafficking. She dedicates herself to keeping the neighborhood's youth away from gangs and shares how she fights daily to provide new opportunities for the local kids. Her story deeply moves Anthony, who sees in her the mother figure he and his brother never had. "Are you here to make a difference?" Raquel asks, her voice a mix of skepticism and hope. "Because if you are, it has to be real. These kids don't need pretty words, they need action." William's response is immediate and firm: "We're here to commit, and we're not leaving until we see real change." He and Anthony become Raquel's allies, helping her develop mentorship programs and secure resources for activities to keep the youth engaged and off the streets. Before long, they become familiar faces in the neighborhood, earning the trust of everyone, even former gang members who start to see a different path. Anthony, in particular, feels a deep connection with these young people, seeing in them reflections of his brother. Every conversation, every word of encouragement he offers, feels like a way to make amends for what he couldn't do for Derek. One night, during a group discussion with some teenagers, a young man named Malik opens up about his regrets and the pressure he feels to follow the older generation into crime. "I know what that's like," Anthony says, with a sincerity that resonates deeply with everyone in the room. "But I also know that you can be more than this already written story. You have choices. I just wish someone had told my brother that before it was too late." As their project gains momentum, they realize they are building a legacy far more powerful than they had imagined. The neighborhood begins to change, violence decreases, and a new generation starts to see a different future, one free from crime and violence. The progress in the neighborhood is remarkable. Alongside Raquel, William and Anthony create a support network offering real alternatives for the youth. It's a new life for them, filled with hope and purpose, but soon they realize their work won't be without threats. The system fueling the violence and trafficking sees the changes as suspicious, or worse, as a threat. One morning, William receives an anonymous letter with a simple but ominous message: "Stay out of our territory." A chill runs down his spine. The short words bring back memories of his days with the DEA when such threats were commonplace. Showing the letter to Anthony, they both understand its implications. They're drawing unwanted attention, and retaliation may only be a matter of time. "Are you sure you want to keep doing this?" Anthony asks, knowing they are risking more than their reputations. "We might be making ourselves targets, William. And these guys, they don't play games." The tension is palpable, but William meets his gaze with unwavering determination. "We left our agencies to make a difference, remember? We can't just back down at the first threat. These people need us." Anthony takes a deep breath, fighting against the fear consuming him. He had always been trained to combat external threats, but now the danger feels deeply personal, involving the people he's connected with. Raquel, upon hearing about the situation, refuses to abandon the project. "If they think a letter will intimidate us, then they don't know the strength of a united community," she asserts with a firmness that inspires both men. Weeks pass, and the threats escalate. Messages are spray-painted on walls, anonymous warnings are left on volunteers' cars, and finally, strange men begin watching William and Anthony from a distance. The danger feels imminent, and tension grows throughout the neighborhood. Despite this, they remain steadfast, doubling their vigilance and instructing the youth to avoid suspicious situations. One night, while returning from a community meeting, William and Anthony are surrounded by a group of armed men. The faces are unfamiliar, but the coldness in their eyes reveals the brutality of men willing to do anything to maintain control. "You think you can just walk in here and change things?" one of the men murmurs icily. "This territory belongs to us, and you're disrupting the order." William steps beside Anthony, trying to maintain his composure. He knows that any wrong word or move could be fatal. "We're here to offer an alternative for these kids. Nothing more," he says, refusing to look away. "But maybe that's what bothers you." The leader of the group lets out a dry laugh, as if hearing something naive. "You don't get it, friend. This neighborhood is our livelihood. And anything that threatens that, has to be eliminated." He looks directly at Anthony. "And you know what that means, don't you?" The threat isn't subtle, it's a promise. But instead of backing down, Anthony meets the man's gaze, his fear hardening into a quiet resolve. "If you think we're afraid, you're wrong. And if you think you'll make us give up, then you don't know us." The men withdraw, but their message is clear: the fight they are facing now is unlike any other. The safety of the youth, Raquel, and everyone who believes in a different future depends on their courage to stay and resist. After the confrontation, William and Anthony know time is running out. The threat has become tangible, and though they remain determined, they feel the weight of the lives they've put at risk by choosing to fight against an entrenched system. Still, the decision to continue is clear: they must protect what they've built through sacrifice. The next morning, Raquel calls for an emergency meeting. I can't ask you to keep going if it's putting your lives in danger. You've already done so much, but maybe it's time to think about your own safety. Her voice is filled with worry, and Anthony feels a pang in his heart. Since meeting Raquel and the neighborhood youth, he's reconnected with his purpose to protect and guide. Walking away now would feel like betraying the commitment he made, not only to them but to his own brother. Raquel, we're not giving up. We knew there'd be risks, but no one's going to intimidate our cause, Anthony responds with a determination that momentarily eases her concerns. If we leave now, everything we've worked for will crumble, and these kids will be easy targets again. William, however, feels the weight of their choices more personally. During a private conversation with Anthony, he admits his doubts. What if the next warning isn't just a threat? I don't care what happens to me, but what if they hurt Raquel or one of these kids? His voice is tense, and Anthony can see just how vulnerable his friend has become. William, the fight we started isn't just ours. It belongs to all of them too, you know that. Anthony places a hand on his friend's shoulder, sharing the weight of their shared responsibility. But you're right. We need a strategy. We can't just react, we have to be ready for anything. The two decide to step up security in the neighborhood, organizing patrols with the residents. They involve the community in every step, showing that their strength lies in unity. The response is powerful. The residents not only accept the idea but embrace it, forming a protective network like nothing seen before. A few days later, the inevitable happens. One evening, as the youth gather for a mentorship session, a suspicious car appears in the distance, its headlights cutting through the darkness. William and Anthony act immediately, ushering everyone inside, securing the exits, and alerting the resident network. But the car doesn't advance. It stays there, a silent reminder of the ever-present vigilance and the power of those who want them gone. Raquel approaches them, trying to mask the fear in her eyes. I can't lose anyone else, she whispers, tears welling up but not falling. I lost my son to this life, and now you're risking yours. Maybe we need to consider if it's worth it. William pulls her into a comforting embrace, feeling the depth of her pain. Raquel, what we've built here is bigger than any one of us. They want us to give up because they know if we keep going, this neighborhood might finally escape their grip. As the tension lingers, the night feels endless. Yet, in the quiet shared among everyone, something unexpected emerges, an unbreakable bond where each person understands what's at stake. Anthony and William exchange a look, a silent acknowledgement that they are exactly where they need to be. That night, everyone leaves safely, but with a certainty etched into their hearts, they're no longer just fighting external threats. They're waging an internal battle against their own fears and the weight of responsibility. And in doing so, they realize the legacy they've begun to build will not be easily erased. And that's the end of this thrilling story.